There. Is that better?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay.
Good, go ahead.
My name is Payton Kearney, and I am a senior elementary education major, and this is my capstone presentation. Currently, I am in a second grade classroom at Hershey Elementary in Hershey, Nebraska. I am in a classroom of 14 students. My competency statement is I am competent at engaging students throughout the learning process in order to increase opportunities for students to explore and apply what they learn. My overall theme is structured learning environments. And some guiding questions that I have are, how can I extend the learning environment beyond the classroom? And how can I make the material relatable to my students' lives? Here is an overview of my evidence of growth. My first piece is a lesson plan from my math block. I was at East Ridge Elementary in a kindergarten classroom. My second piece of evidence is an example of students' work from my lit block placement. I was in a 5th grade classroom at Belmont Elementary. My third piece of evidence is a worksheet from a lesson that I taught in my student teaching semester. Again, I am in a 2nd grade classroom at Hershey Elementary. For my first piece of evidence, I have one of the lessons that I wrote during my math block practicum. Again, I was in a kindergarten classroom at East Ridge Elementary. During this time, we had been learning about word problems. Our students had worked on addition and subtraction problems throughout the year and were now going to practice using their skills in word problems. In this lesson, I had pre-made story problems on my iPad using the Explain Everything app. I would read the problem to the class and choose a student to come up and demonstrate the story problem. As the student demonstrated the problem, the rest of the class was to write the addition or subtraction sentence that goes along with the problem on their paper. An example would be, there are 5 pigs in a pen and 3 jump out. How many are left? Students would be shown pictures of pigs and a pen and actually drag them out to represent the problem. I thought that by using technology, students would be interested and it would keep students engaged in the learning. I realized very quickly that just using technology doesn't make it engaging. I lost their attention very quickly. The students who were up at the iPad were the only ones engaged in what they were doing. I also thought that using farm animals to make the story would be cute and fun. I really didn't take into consideration who my audience was. The farm animals weren't very relatable to these students' lives, as most of them don't come across these animals on a regular basis. It also didn't set them up to be able to apply what they are learning to their everyday lives. My first piece of evidence connects to my competency statement because it shows that I wasn't able to engage my students in their learning process. I lost their focus. At that point, they were not retaining what I was teaching. I also didn't set the lesson up for my students to be able to apply what they are learning. If I was to change some things, I would definitely use some real-life scenarios that are relevant to those specific students, such as, I have 2 friends at my table and 1 more joins. How many are there now? This would be something that they could visualize and actually see on a daily basis. My second piece of evidence is an example from one of my students' work from my lit block practicum at Belmont Elementary in a 5th grade classroom. Prior to this lesson, we had been talking about the importance of adding detail to our writing. We discussed how we could use our senses to come up with details to add. In this lesson, I had several jars that were filled with cotton balls that had different smells on them. Some of the smells were coffee, vinegar, peppermint, and onion. The students got to pass around 1 jar at a time and smell it. They had to write down the first memory or idea that they could remember, or that it made them think of. And they had to add descriptive details about that memory. Students had so much fun recalling their fun memories and thinking about what the smell made them think of. The next step to this lesson was to have kids choose their favorite memory and write a descriptive paper about the memory using their senses. The students were able to apply what they had previously learned about descriptive writing and adding detail to this activity. They were very engaged throughout the whole activity and came up with lots of great memories. But when it came to the actual writing part, a lot of them started to lose interest. The students who don't like to write had fun doing the activity, but then had trouble keeping that enthusiasm when it came to the actual writing part. This artifact connects to my competency statement because it shows that I did a better job of getting my students engaged for most of the learning process, but they had fun adding descriptive words about the smells, but struggled adding it to their writing. It shows that I was able to plan an activity where they could apply their previous knowledge about writing and also take what they're learning from this lesson and apply it to their writing in the future. If I could do this lesson over again, I would do the same activity but guide them more when it came to the writing. I would give students the opportunity to have an organizer to organize their thoughts before they went into their writing, so they might not have lost interest as much. My third piece of evidence was a worksheet from a lesson plan that I taught in my student teaching semester at Hershey Elementary. Again, I'm in the second grade classroom. Prior to teaching this lesson, we had been learning about liquids and solids and how heat can cause chemical changes. We also learned how some solids and liquids can mix and others do not. This lesson, I had students come back to our back table and they observed me making pancakes. We talked through the process of how adding a liquid, which would be water, to a solid, the pancake mix, can turn it into a liquid. Then, by using heat, it can be changed back into a solid. They got to see the process and ask questions as we made pancakes. As we went through each change, students recorded their observations on their worksheet. The worksheet is shown on the screen. Once we were finished, they got to eat their pancakes. Students were engaged in the lesson and actively participated by answering and asking questions. The content was very relatable to students because who doesn't love to eat? It also related back to their previous lessons about solids and liquids and whether they can mix or not mix. My third artifact relates back to my competency statement because it shows that my students were engaged throughout the whole learning process and they were all participating and answering questions. It also shows that I can relate the topic back to my students' lives to help them apply what they're learning to their everyday lives. Students were able to see how there are things all around them every day that are solids and liquids and that show chemical change. After doing this lesson, I had several students that would stop me in the hallways to point out some liquids and solids that they saw. Or they would come to school the next morning and tell me about what they had for supper and how they had a liquid and a solid that they mixed together to make their food. This is how I knew that my kids not only understood what they were taught, but they were able to apply the understanding to real-life scenarios. So for my synthesis, my big ideas are that student engagement increases when learning content is applicable in the students' lives. If students can relate the content to their everyday life, then they can learn more successfully. By giving them topics or finding things that interest them, then I know that they are able to use that later in life and apply it in their life. Another idea was that it is important to build relationships with your students so that you know the interests and can plan engaging lessons for them. For my reflection, I have answered a couple questions. One of them, what have I learned? By making the content relatable to my students, it helps them be more engaged with what they are learning. Also, if content can be related back to students, then they are more likely to go out and apply what they have learned to their daily lives. Another question was, how can I continue to grow? I plan to take the time to figure out how to relate new content to my students' lives. I also plan to find and come up with fun activities or ideas for students to explore and apply what they had learned. I usually like to go to Teacher Pay Teacher or Pinterest to find some of my fun ideas. For my future, I plan to continue finding ways to make lessons more engaging and relatable to students. By focusing on my specific students' interests and finding ideas that they would be into, and also planning those fun activities in my lessons just to enhance their learning. I recently got a job at North Platte Public Schools as a 5th grade teacher, and I'm very eager to start. But since I will be transitioning from a 2nd grade classroom to a 5th grade classroom, I will have to get more creative in my ideas on how to engage all my students in the learning. I'm hoping that I have a good teaching partner that I can go to for questions. I also have a lot of previous teachers that have reached out to me and said to call them with any questions. Another goal I have for my future is to start a graduate program within the next couple of years, possibly thinking in administration. To wrap it up, I will restate my competency statement. I am competent at engaging students throughout the learning process in order to increase opportunities for students to explore and apply what they learn. My artifacts that demonstrated those growth were my lesson plan from math block, which had no engagement and was not relatable. My student example from a lesson I taught in lit block, which was relatable to students but lost their interest during the writing. And then I had my worksheet from student teaching, where students were engaged in the lesson and were able to apply what they were learning and relate to the content that they were learning. Are there any questions?
Good. Congrats on your job as well.
Yay,
this is exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Another 5th grade teacher.
Yes.
I was just trying to see if I have any questions. You know, I think maybe a question that I have, Payton, is when you're thinking about, sorry, I'm reading my own comments as I'm trying to formulate.
Okay.
Thinking about, you talked about relationships, right, as a way to sort of you leverage those relationships in order to understand how you can integrate their interests and things. How do you do that? How do you, what's your plan for establishing and cultivating those relationships?
I guess I have some fun little games that we have played to kind of tell me a little bit more about their interests, but I really love just sitting next to them while they're working sometimes and just asking them about what they're doing. And then, my 2nd graders right now, I guess, open up really easily and tell me all about their life. So it was really easy to find things that were relatable to them. Going into 5th grade, again, maybe finding more games that shows me what they're interested in. And then, hoping that I just can get that one-on-one time with a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I love that when you talk about kind of sidling up next to them as they're working on something, right? Because then you can do both, right? You can sort of develop a relationship as well as you're talking about their work, right?
Mm-hmm.
That does it too, that one-on-one time. I think you pinpointed the exact thing that you need is to just be able to spend some time with each one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have any questions?
Tell us a little bit about why administration. What about that interests you as you start your career as a teacher?
Well, I kind of always knew that I wasn't set on being a teacher my whole life. I just didn't know what route to go. So I guess I'm not sure if being a principal is what I wanted, or maybe just working in our ESU that we have and doing curriculum related stuff. I don't know. I do see principal, I guess, as my future, but I just thought administration would get me in the door and send me to different avenues, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Is the North Platte district big?
We have about, I think, 7 or 8 elementary schools. But we have our ESU that goes to North Platte and all of our surrounding areas.
Mm-hmm.
So all the way to Ogallala.
Yeah.
And so.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I hope you keep us informed.
I will.
Of what you do. That'll be cool. Okay. Any other
I don't think so.
Okay,
Nice job.
awesome. Thanks, Payton.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop recording, and then